It's very easy for us as humans to look at what you're doing and go, oh, well, that's better than what I'm doing. But no, we all have our own very unique weave in the universe. We all have our own very unique personality, and nobody is us, nobody is like us. So I think we need to embrace that uniqueness. I don't think that everything that we're told about history and ancient civilizations is anywhere close to true. And either, we just don't know what happened before, or it's hidden. Purpose is not something that you necessarily need to be able to articulate. The purpose is the way that you show up. The difference between people who are successful and not successful is...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thoughts on Purpose podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode to be deep diving with this phenomenal human being, Monty Hook, coming to us from Bali. And you can see Monty's podcast setup is far superior to mine. This is what he does. This is his jam. And we're going to find out all about the incredible work Monty's doing over there in Bali. Monty, thanks so much for being here, legend. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, man. It's an honor to be here. I know it took a little bit of back and forth to get this going, but I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to give everyone a bit of background about you. I'll be honest with you, there's a lot I want to just find out from you. There's so much I want to say as far as a bit of an intro goes, but then I want to hear it from you. Like, nothing is better than that, in my opinion. But this conversation, just to give you and everyone listening a bit of context, one thing that really drew me to your work, Monty, and it's interesting, your work has been showing up in my space for a little while on different platforms. I've seen you popping up, and then I saw you interviewing Joel Brown, who's who I work alongside, and I started exploring more of your work following. And so I know this is going to be a very deep conversation. We're going to really access some great stuff here, but you call yourself a truth seeker. Can I just ask, what does that mean to you, first of all, before your intro?
Yeah, it's a very broad question, I guess. And I guess it seems like one of my passions is just uncovering a lot of agendas that are happening in the world. And truth is, can be subjective, and it means different things to different people. I don't believe that the truth is fixed, but I certainly believe that we are living in a world where we are controlled, and we don't even know that we are controlled. So just calling myself a truth seeker, I'm not one of these super crazy conspiracy theorists, and that's my world, that's my living. It's just more the case that I am very interested in opening up people's eyes, so not trying to do that in a way trying to show my opinions and trying to get people to believe what I believe. It's more like, just planting seeds for people so that they can start thinking for themselves and start accessing different thoughts and ideas that maybe the world that I live in may not be what it seems.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, we're going to unpack that, and you can hear straight away from that, everyone listening, that this is going to be a great conversation. So definitely stay tuned. Bit of I guess, an intro for you, Monty, just to give everyone a bit of context. You are an entrepreneur out there in Bali. You are an advisor, a truth seeker, as we've said. You're the founder of the Lighthouse Studio in Bali, which is something I'm very curious to find out more about, which is essentially this is just my own understanding of it from what I've seen. I checked it out online. It's a space or a hub for people to go and produce content and podcasts and coaches and consultants and so on and so forth to go out there and create their videos and so on and so forth. Is that right?
Yep. So Lighthouse Studios is the name of the place. So as many people would know, many probably don't know, Bali is like the center of the world for digital nomads and life coaches, business coaches, e-commerce experts, and tantra teachers, and this, that, and the other thing. And you and many other people listening, I'm assuming, are part of this massive movement in the world of wanting to educate people which I, wholeheartedly believe is a beautiful movement. It's a good sign for the world that, that we want to learn and we want to be educated. Yeah. So, I mean, you're a coach, you work with Joel Brown, and there's this massive movement of educators in the world, which is a beautiful thing for the planet, right? Because it kind of signifies that there's a lot of people wanting to consume new information, and they want to learn about actually what is good for them in, health, the mindset, and spirituality, and all these things. So Bali is probably the biggest center in the world where people gravitate to. There's a few places in the world. Bali is certainly, if not the biggest, one of the biggest. So there's a lot of content creators here. So, you're running a video podcast, we're talking online. And so a lot of people are creating content already. So we have a purpose-built facility with 3 studios where we're recording podcasts. We're in studios like this one. We've got multiple cameras in here. You can switch between camera 1 and camera 2. And, we have all the videographers, everything. So a lot of people are actually coming over to Bali, recording their content for their programs, online courses and masterclasses. And then we have people running workshops and events here, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a co-working cafe. So we're a bit of a hub. So there's a community of people kind of hanging out here, a lot of cool conversations. And it's a very good vibe to be around. So I encourage people to come and visit.
Yes, I love it, brother. Really inspiring stuff. And I was actually showing your studio to someone who I know here in Australia. He's a videographer and he's starting his business. And I was like, he kind of had this idea of, sharing other people's content and having an impact through the work he does. And he's like, he was kind of struggling with his vision. And so I actually pulled up your studio and showed him. I was like, this is Monty. This is what he's up to. And it just inspired him so much, like just possibilities. So I guess that's one of the reasons I wanted to chat to you as well, Monty, is, you're someone who I would assert is living your purpose. You are someone who's fully stepping in to be an entrepreneur, to create a space like that. A huge amount of work goes into that, a huge amount of commitment. And what was that one?
And money.
And money. Yes. So backing yourself, backing your dream. It's incredible. So I want people to learn from your mentalities of what it actually takes, not just to think about, but actually to step into what you believe is the highest calling in your life. Mm-hmm. Also, the next thing I just wanted to add about you was you are the host of the Rabbit Hole podcast. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And I'm assuming that's all got to do with the truth-seeking side of things.
Yeah, so I don't have any fixed agenda on, it going down rabbit holes and talking about, current state of the world and conspiracy theories. It's more like I'm just very interested to talk to people who are on the cutting edge of, their fields. There's a lot of stuff around, nutrition and wellness and personal development and entrepreneurship and all manner of things, but it always tends to find some commonalities in everybody having their own version of what they see happening in the world that is not, the mainstream way of thinking, I guess. So
yes, I love that. Very important, and there's a huge need for that right now. So I love the work you're doing. Monty, what's a conversation? Actually, let me ask it to you this way. What's a question that you wish more people would ask you? You're obviously producing a lot of media and everything like that, but what's a question you wish more people would just say, ask you this question so you can just open up this point of conversation?
Yeah. I struggle with that question. Actually, I'm not a content creator. Okay. I'm just somebody who has, I guess I've seen gaps in markets. Every business that I've ever had. My other company is an outsourcing company. I started that in 2012. And, that was kind of at the start of a trend, I guess, before people, before everybody had a virtual assistant. Mm-hmm. So I guess I just am good at seeing where markets want to go and where people, I don't consider myself to be the messenger. I'm not the speaker. I'm not the Joel Brown of this world who has this super eloquent voice and is great on stage. And, people say I'm good at it, but I don't feel that is me. I kind of look at people like yourself and Joel Brown, and what are you guys doing? What is this movement happening in the world, and how can I build something that supports the movement, I guess. So I guess in essence, yeah, my abilities, my gifts is I'm able to build things, of course. But yeah, I guess it's seeing the movement. So, to answer your question on what I wish people would ask me more, I think it's more on the, what people see of me is me on the podcast. It's me on Instagram, etc. But actually, what I'm really freaking good at is the back end of businesses, and I'm an advisor and on the board of a few different companies. And I've got a lot of wisdom, I guess, in unpacking businesses. And so anytime somebody shares something about their particular case with their business, my brain just kind of explodes with ideas. And I think people don't necessarily see that, or they don't necessarily know that. So when I get the opportunity to talk to people about their specific business cases, so yeah, there's a lot of wisdom that I have in scaling businesses, which I'm surprised people don't ask me more about, I guess. So.
Got it. Interesting. All right. Well, that's a great answer, and that's always interesting to see what people's answer is to that question. And I'm curious to explore that a little bit more, some of your business wisdom for sure, especially in today's world where, from what I am seeing, so many people are looking to start their own venture. Like they're fed up with the old structures that were in place that were kind of got us to many of the results we're experiencing right now. We need, I believe, and I don't know if we need it. I would say we do need it, but I say the opportunity is for more humans to actually embrace their gifts and step up as leaders and step up as whatever they feel called to be. In order to do that, though, there is a business mindset and, I guess that whole business world and conversation that they need to be okay with, and they need to embrace. It's one thing to, follow your passion and all this stuff, but then when it comes to actually monetizing, that's when the rubber meets the road. So it sounds like you're the man for that, which is incredible. Monty, what's been the most inspiring podcast episode you've had yet? Like, I'm sure you've interviewed many great guests, but what's been one episode that's really stood out for you from all the people you've spoken to?
Yeah. Actually, the Joel Brown one that we did, I think it was the second. I think we've spoken 3 times. The second one that we did, where we spoke about his relationship with God and how he explains that in the context of, which is not the mainstream way of kind of explaining it, like his relationship with God. And if I really, I do a lot of pondering on, what I think is happening in the state of the world and where humanity is at, etc. And, obviously there's a lot of nonsense that we see on the news and in the media and things that are going on. And I actually think, it can be distilled down to godlessness, right? Now, I'm not aligned to what any one person's belief is in how they, view God or view, the universe, or what their relationship is with a higher power, or, however people choose to view that. But I think the godlessness aspect is one of the biggest things. And to kind of circle back to what you're talking about with this movement of, people who are wanting to step into some kind of leadership or some kind of business, or etc. I think that is because there is a collective need, and there's a collective, there's something in the collective field where people are tuning into, we have to move back in that direction, right? So that's why, things that are of, I guess, a spiritual nature and, meditation and all these kind of things that are really coming alive in the last, decade or the last few decades. So those things have always been there, but they were not mainstream things in, the 80s, I guess, 80s, 90s. And so I think we need to move from where we have been from a destructive capitalist world to, I believe it's possible to have a, something which works for everybody. And I think, yeah, this movement that we're talking about people being part of can come down to that aspect of godlessness. We've moved away from that, and now we need to move back in that direction. And so those conversations, and that particular conversation with Joel, where he's got the ability, he's got his own very powerful. It's easy sometimes to look at somebody who's preaching, right? And it's like, it feels very like icky, like, like they got their thing and they're trying to tell me what to do. And somebody like Joel's got the ability to speak about what it is for him and inspire people to feel into what their actual beliefs are, and then find the alignment in what he's saying, but in their own way, I guess. So,
yes.
Yeah.
I love that, brother. And I've seen a number of clips. I've not watched the full thing yet, but I've seen a number of clips from that podcast, and they were, it seemed like a phenomenal conversation. It's certainly something I love to speak about, finding God and connecting with a greater power and actually having a deeper spiritual connection. I believe if we don't have that in place, we're absolutely missing out. If you're not exploring some sort of spiritual connection for yourself, then you're not going to be as powerful as you could ultimately be. And by powerful, I mean, optimized as a human. I guess we could talk about it like that. Can I ask you, Monty, because having followed you again for a little while now, I get a sense of, what you stand for and what you're about. And I see that, you are someone who's truly seeking the truth. What have you come to learn? Like, what does it mean to be, I guess, or to have a great spiritual connection to something greater?
I think one of the misconceptions, or one of the problems that we have in the world with spirituality, I guess, is that it's associated with organized religion. And for the most part, these religions have their own agendas, and it's more about the organization, than it is about the actual teachings itself, right? So I think the actual teachings get tainted, and then they actually get weaponized as well, and then it doesn't actually help anybody. So I think one of the greatest, if there's something that humanity has to move through, it is moving away from this idea that one person's view is right and one person's is another, and we need to have compassion for everybody and their belief and their way. So that's probably the greatest thing that keeps coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think humanity needs to move past a point where spirituality is not about an organization that is imposing moral values, right? Which is what most religions are doing. And get back to, what is the core original teachings, of, what they were intended for in the first place,
mm-hmm.
which is connecting to something greater than yourself, which is, connecting with yourself. And at the end of the day, I think what that does for people, like you said before, it actually gives people a north star, so
1,000%.
So it's not about whether this is the right way of doing it or that's the right way of doing it. It's very easy for us as humans to, look at what you're doing and go, oh, well, that's better than what I'm doing. But no, we all have our own very unique weave in the universe. We all have our own very unique personality, and nobody is us. Nobody is like us. So I think we need to embrace that uniqueness, and that we have our own way, our own belief. And even though there's 8 billion people on the planet, there's 8 billion ways of being, so I think that's the lesson that we have to figure out as individuals.
I love that. I know that idea terrifies many people, because that idea of, I guess, so many people doing their own thing to a degree, for many people, that's a scary thought. And I feel like that's a lot. Like that's got a lot to do with the kind of traps that we've put ourselves in, or the cages we put ourselves in as humans, where we're like we have to be following a particular way of being and living in order to be safe.
Yeah. But also
And
on a practical level, we're talking about people, stepping into a business or creating something new. And when you do that, we're kind of in a space of looking for inspiration. We're looking at people who are doing other things, and then we're learning from experts and paying experts money, and they're saying we should do things this certain way. But it constantly surprises me how people are making money and building businesses from just seemingly weird, off the rails stuff that nobody ever thought would work. I I was a moderator on a panel the other day, at an event for content creation. And one of the guys there, he's from the UK, and in 2 years he built 1 million followers on YouTube, and talking about Indonesian cuisine. Right, that's
wow,
it. Right,
wow, yeah,
and who would have told him 5 years ago that you could do that, you could be successful at that. So I think it's very easy to fall into the trappings of seeing what other people are doing, and well, I could never do that as well as them, or that thing is already taken. There's enough room for everybody because there is no version of you. And I think what people don't realize enough is that certain people are going to resonate and connect with you on an energetic level that they're not going to connect with other people. So you could be talking the exact same words, the exact same thing, selling the exact same products, but people are going to resonate with you because of the way that you show up. And I think people really underestimate the power that they have, especially if they're being authentic. Like that's the work, is to figure out how just to I think people try to craft their business too much, and they try to craft themselves too much, try to mold themselves into something that they think is going to work, when actually what works is, fuck it, I'm just going to be myself.
yeah. Wow, that is refreshing, like advice, I guess you'd call it, coming from you, brother, because you obviously have got a level of success in business that a lot of people would look up to. But hearing you say that, especially, you're advising businesses and everything else, that's incredible. And obviously it is a balance where, you don't reinvent the wheel too much. And it's important you do have the humility to learn from other people and be guided by other people, but ultimately trusting yourself enough to bring it back to yourself and say, okay, does this actually align with what I feel I'm here to do on earth?
Yeah, and look, it is tricky. It is tricky to come up with business ideas and step into things, and it actually have some real tangibility in the market, and it really work. And then try not to mold yourself to something else and be. But I think that's the ultimate dance of being a human being. Just trying to
Totally.
figure that shit out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's a beautiful journey when you embrace it, but you don't need, you get to actually understand that is the journey. There's nothing wrong if you're at a point where you are figuring things out yourself, and what you feel is true looks different from everyone else. Like, that's actually important, and I think that's a good distinction to make for people, because they're caught up there, like it doesn't seem to work when I do things exactly like other people. It's not clicking for me. Well, maybe it's not meant to. You are a unique individual, and trusting yourself is so important. Monty, can I just ask, you mentioned being authentic before. For yourself, how do you know within you, like, what feedback are you getting within your body to let you know that you're being authentic?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever been asked asked that one. Um, uh, I think it's just I do a lot of reflecting. I do a lot of pondering, and I am human, so I quite often get things wrong. But I think the greatest power that we all have is having some honest reflection and some honest feedback for ourselves. Sometimes things present themselves as amazing opportunities and on the surface seem like that's what we should be doing because it's in alignment with what we planned or what our goals were, but something doesn't feel quite right about it. It's like, oh, intuitively that doesn't quite feel right, but it's so aligned to, what I dreamed or what I had, that we ignore the feelings, we ignore the intuition and do it anyway. I think over time I've just gotten way, way better at just listening to the intuition and just really, I think the greatest way to do that is to be very comfortable with just saying no to as many, to everything, right? If you can be not attached to saying no to things that aren't aligned, then I think you'll find more things come across that are going to be a yes. So I think we've just got to be very, very discerning. So for me, I think it's, I try to do as much as I can every day to have moments of grounding. And of course I have my moments where I get mad at the team and, I lose my shit. But I try to, as much as possible, keep myself grounded and have a lot of moments of grounding. And that can look like just stopping and breathing. That can look like stretching. That can be just sitting and having a coffee and just, whatever. But actually having purposeful moments of grounding to keep myself in that space. I think that where things really go wrong is where I get lost in when I don't do that, and I kind of get lost in the day to day, and then I start getting a little bit of anxiety kind of coming in. And then I think I lose the ability to tune into what is, what is right for me and what isn't. So when I get to those stages, then, and that's also having other good people around me to call me out on that. Like, hey, Monty, you're looking pretty stressed. Like, go have a couple of days off or whatever. And
got it. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I've got the ability most of the time to be in tune. And then when I'm not in tune, it's like, all right, go spend a couple of days out of life. So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that does. It's, I guess it's one of those things, and I love that you're so in tune to your intuition, and it's the wisdom of the ages, isn't it? It's know thyself, which is literally what it's about. It's like actually get to know yourself, know what's true for you, know what actually is best for you, know what allows you to be optimized mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and take stock of that stuff and start doing more of it. And start, as you said, don't take on things that feel out of alignment, that feel heavy, that feel, you're doing it out of obligation or because you think you need to.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to what you just said, brother. I love it.
Thanks.
Tell me more about your, like, what inspired you to come to Bali? Because you're Australian, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do I still sound Australian?
Yeah, like you got a few different accents mixed in there, brother. Like, yeah, but.
Okay. So you want me to be honest here? Most of your audience is Australian, right?
Well, actually, probably more in the US.
Okay. Well, around 2014. No, sorry. I started the business, the outsourcing company in 2012.
Yep.
And in 2013, I started traveling a fair bit. So the operations were in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just doing a lot of travel at that time, and I was invited to come and speak in Bali at some workshops and to speak about outsourcing. And I just had the right connections, and I kept getting invited to come back to Bali, and I just fell in love with Bali. This was 2013. So from 2014 to 2016, I was based in Bali, but I was traveling around the world all the time. So I had a villa here and I was just traveling all the time. So I was traveling to Singapore, London, Australia, Philippines, all over the place, like speaking at seminars and running the business and doing things. And but I always had this affinity to Bali. And the more that I'd always travel back to Australia. So I'd travel back, see my family and do business and whatever else. And I had an office there as well. But as time went on, I just felt less aligned with Australia. I just didn't, every time I stepped off the plane in Australia, I didn't feel like this is home. It felt less and less. And it got to the point where it started feeling like there's something feeling off about Australia. And I had that feeling probably since 2014, 2015. And just my intuition was telling me, yeah, something's up with Australia. Something's wrong about this. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And then through COVID time, it all kind of started to make sense and all click into gear. And I don't necessarily need to go down the rabbit hole on the details of what of all of that. But
yeah,
I think a lot of things happened in Australia where people just didn't think that kind of stuff could happen. Like we have taken Australia for granted as being, it's the lucky country. It's the greatest place on earth. We've got it better here than everybody in the rest of the world. And maybe true, but it's also a very dangerous place to be in when you're that level of complacency, So I think that kind of creates an atmosphere where people could very easily be taken advantage of and potentially be used as guinea pigs. And I'll kind of leave it at that. But in 2019, I came back to Bali after living in Manila for 3 years. And I just, from that time, I was like, nah, Bali's home. I'm done. Now, I mean, never say never. I'm, not going to say that I'm going to be here forever, but I feel way more at home here. So yeah, I love the culture here. I'm a surfer. There's a lot of reasons to love Bali. A lot of people don't. That's fine. But for me, it just kind of resonates. I think a big part of it is the Hindu culture here, like just the way that they are day to day. Like at the front of my house every day, there's people out in the ladies are out in the street praying on the street and putting the flowers on the road. It's like
that's beautiful.
It's just all these moments of presence and just reminders of kind of what's important. So I really appreciate that aspect of Bali.
Yes, I can fully see why you'd be so drawn to it, brother. It sounds like an incredible. I've never actually been to Bali, but I've heard so much about it.
And unfortunately, a lot of tourists never, they don't have. First of all, they don't have their eyes open to that kind of thing, right? It's not in their sphere to see it anyway. So a lot of people come to Bali and they stay in the hotel and they drink bintangs and they get drunk and they ride their scooters and do dumb shit, and that's their experience of Bali. And then it gets a bad rap. And but that's not Bali. That's just dumb Aussies.
Yeah, I totally get it, brother. And actually, the thing that draws me to Bali and my wife, like we've spoken about this a lot, is the spiritual side, that groundedness, that connection to something far greater, and that reverence for life as well. And I would say you're so right when you speak about Australia, and obviously there's many other countries too that have just lost that substance, that depth that cultures like the Indonesian culture in many cases seem to have. And with, again, like you were saying, the godlessness is something that just it leads to shallow lives. It leads to people constantly clawing their way through life, seeking something, trying to fill a void that just can't be filled with anything external. Like it needs to be something
a lot of disconnection, and a lot of like desperate energy. Like, you see what's happening in the United States with, I don't want to go too far into it, but this whole trans and gender kind of thing. It's like, everybody can believe what they want to believe. Everybody can call themselves what they want to call themselves. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But I just think what is happening in that culture is just a manifestation of disconnection to something greater. So then there's just this air of, wanting to fight, and just everybody being lost and desperate, and that's just what it feels like. There's no North Star for these people.
I agree. And I love that you're using that terminology, the North Star. Like, that's something I literally say to people all the time, the North Star. I think that you're so right.
That's a very broad generalization, right?
Yeah.
I'm not putting everybody into that category just because they have colored hair, right?
Yeah. I get it.
But yeah,
I totally get what you're saying, and hopefully people can read between the lines of what you're saying here as well, and as they listen to this. Everyone's free to decide who they are, what they are. Like, no worries, but forcing it on other people and actually saying, like, this is how we have to be as a society. Like, no, this is where we have to draw the line. And I love that you're open about it, brother. I think it's very important. It's a very important conversation, and I admire you for using your platforms to bring people's awareness to this. I think we should all have the freedom to continue to decide as individuals. Like, just saying that this is the way we have to be, it never works well. It never works well. Like, you try and repress people too much or force people to be one particular way, it's going to blow out. It's going to blow out in ugly ways. So, and it's amazing to see that humanity hasn't learned this quite yet.
Yeah. I still think that we're not even close to having learned it. I think we've still got a lot more period of weirdness to go through.
Do you think, based on what you've learned, Monty, that it's possible for us to ever reach that? Because some people are like, we're going to reach the Enlightenment age. And I don't know, like, based off what because you've obviously done a lot of reading, like, I sense you've done so much work and you've had some very powerful conversations. Do you think that's even possible for humans to reach that point where it's like just bliss?
Well, and look, this is a question I quite often ask a lot of my guests, because they have very profound views on these kind of things. So, excuse me, I don't know that enlightenment and bliss is the thing that we're all seeking. I actually don't think so. I think part of the wonder of being a human is that we have these sides, we have these battles, we have these, and without that, would we be who we are? If everything was just blissful, then would we be who we are? I don't think so. I think we need some challenge. And I know that sounds not, I don't agree with having wars, and I don't agree with but I think it's cycles that humanity has to go through, where we cause so much suffering for ourselves, realize, okay, that's fucking stupid, let's stop doing that.
Yeah.
And we have to go into something else. So I think where we're at a tipping point at the end of something where we have been slaves and we have been mistreating each other, and we do a lot of things in society that make no sense whatsoever. And the world is definitely run by greed. And as much as people like to think that this person's a philanthropist, they're not a philanthropist. They're doing dark things to the world, and that kind of stuff exists. And we're at a tipping point where we're going to, at some point in the next decade, we're kind of tipping over into somewhere where I think we'll have a lot more peace. And I think we're going to move through some more darkness, maybe in the next decade, or certainly in the next 5 years. And there's something catastrophic could happen. It could take something very, very big. I hope it doesn't come to that. But I think at some point in our lifetime, we'll move into something of a more peaceful kind of era. At some point again, we'll unravel that, and so that's what they say happened in Atlantis. I don't know what
I'm all over this conversation, brother. I love it. Let's go there. Yeah.
So people talk about Atlantis being this very civilized, very, very civilized societies, and had these great technologies and they lived in peace. But actually they, I believe they imploded, they did the exact same cycle. And I think that that's just what happens time and time again. I don't think that everything that we're told about history and ancient civilizations is anywhere close to true. I think humanity has been going through these cycles of self-destruction for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And either, we just don't know what happened before, or it's hidden. Definitely some combination of both, I think. But I think I think that's the way that the Earth, at the end of the day, Mother Earth, she decides. People think of, I had one person tell me one time that they argued with me, and they, I was describing the Earth being alive, and the Earth is is its own spirit, and ultimately the Earth decides. And they were like, no, but the Earth is just like this big giant pebble. It's like, I don't believe that one bit. We tend to think that we are the ultimate controllers, of what happens here. We view ourselves as being the ultimates, but actually we're just fleas on a dog, and at any time the dog can shake us off, right? And
True.
I think it'll happen at some point again in the future, and that's very scary for people as well. I think that's also something that sends people into a tailspin and for trying to figure themselves out. But I think we have to figure out how to be okay with, whatever happens. And I'm here at this time right now to make a difference, and I'm going to make use of the time that I do have here and not get too caught up in whether an asteroid's going to explode me in 60 years time or not.
Yeah, brother, I love that so much. Yeah, so much in that. And I think that what you said at the end there is a reason why we're here at this point in time, and there's no accident for that at all. Regardless of what's coming in the next 10 years and beyond, we have the potential to write it out, I believe. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here at this point in time. Like, there's something within us that can have an experience through all of that. And it might not be necessarily the easiest time or the hardest time. We don't know. But can you be at peace amongst all of that? And I believe that that's for me, that's what I'm constantly aiming. It's like, can I be at peace with it all? And that's always the metric. It's like, where am I in resistance to it? And I keep coming back to that point. Yeah. And I think that learning to just embrace the fact that we don't know, we actually know nothing. And yeah, as you said, we're certainly not in control. And learning to be okay with that is important.
And actually being okay with the fact that we are fleas. We are very, very small in the grand scheme of things. And I think people so get caught up in talking about, purpose and vision and all these kind of things. I think people get too caught up in needing to know 100% what their purpose is. Now, if I was to look at my life 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and what I'm doing now, well, I wouldn't know what I'm doing now. And I'm sure neither would you. 99%, if not more, of people could say the same thing. So somebody living on purpose now could never have predicted that 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So purpose is forever changing. I 100% believe that the purpose of my life is to be constantly trying to figure out what my purpose is, and just being okay with the fact that that's the journey of being a human. As I walk this life, it's just figuring out my purpose every day. And what that allows me to do is just be okay with what unfolds today, and be able to pivot, be able to move, rather than getting so fixated on how my mind thinks something should be, and then being very disappointed when it doesn't, unfold like that. Just being malleable, being okay with, the journey.
Yes.
So, I'm all for having a North Star. I'm all for being on, but it's more about being on purpose. Like, how I show up is on purpose, but people get too fixated on their purpose being their vocation. My purpose is this business. My purpose in life is to teach people this one thing. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. But that could change tomorrow, and be okay with that.
Yes. Yeah. Such awesome points you're making there. I agree 1,000%, Monty. And it's taken me a while to get to that point. Like, I used to be the coach who was like, to people, map out your purpose. And I still talk about that to a degree, but it's like, map out your purpose and be prepared that none of it could happen the way you want, something that or something better. And that's what I usually say to people. Like, and again, it's not a material thing. It's an internal experience that you have as you go through life. It's like a peace. Like that's the, and again, I really believe that's the ultimate purpose for any human being. It's like, this is just, of course, my point of view. What do I actually know? But it is just to find peace in amongst it, and find the order and the blessing and the gift and the opportunity. Like, find the gold in amongst the amongst the craziness.
Yeah, and I think people also, especially from where we're from, we get very caught up in needing to do big things. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with doing big things, of course, but the people that we idolize and the people that we learn from are the ones doing, for the Elon Musks of the world. And we think that if we're going to have some meaningful impact in this life, that we have to build rocket ships or something, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's like that. I got a very humbling lesson in 2013 when I was living in Bali, and my way of being until that time was very driven, like every day I'm full hustle mode. I've been like that probably since I was 8 years old. And then I was staying in a villa, and it was a friend's villa, and the gardener, or actually was the landowner, he was like 80 years old, and he would come every morning at 6 a.m. and he'd sweep the flowers. Sweep the around the pool.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I'm like, just come once a week, dude. Like, you're disturbing me. This is very inefficient. The system, your SOPs, like, just come once a week. You could do 7 houses. Like, why are you doing this?
Yes.
And then after a lot of, that was kind of a time I was doing a lot of reflection, and it really dawned on me that the way I'm showing up is I'm in full complain mode. Everything is, everything is not good enough. Everything was always not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Putting the actions I was taking, so I was constantly in hustle mode. And then here's this guy who is just completely on purpose. This is his land. This is what he's been doing for 80 years, and he is going to die very, very happy. Like, this guy. This is his purpose in life. And who am I to judge him when he's very, very happy and he's living a life of purpose? And I'm constantly trying to figure out my purpose, and I'm complaining about the person who's on purpose. It's like, so be okay with, your purpose not needing to be some big, you don't need to build rocket ships.
So. Yes. That's an awesome point, mate. Because certainly, many young people nowadays feel this huge burden and pressure that they have to be so much and do so much because social media is so noisy, and there's always people standing in front of Ferraris with supermodels. Like, this kind of fake world that we live in, that it causes so much, friction and challenge in people's lives that's not necessary. And then you've got other people who, which is very much so what I feel like I'm on the journey with my wife and our 3 kids. It's like, we're focusing on how can we simplify? How can we get back to basics? Like, let's strip it right back. Like, how can we live as smallly as we possibly can, but impact as many people as we can? And like, that's the conversation we're having. And I certainly know we're not alone in that. It's like, how do we reconnect with what's, as you said, what's most important?
I think what people on the surface resonate with, or they think that making an impact means doing something big, making a lot of money, and reaching a lot of people. But actually, if you feel to live a more simple life, like what you're doing, and just by sharing that, you're showing, you're connecting with something with people that is inherently inherently and intuitively within them that maybe they're actually really, really seeking.
Yes.
But the world is telling them that they shouldn't be seeking that. And I
Yes.
think that is a direction that the world needs to go in for sure. And there's absolutely nothing wrong also with building something big. And if that's your calling, then awesome. But don't go in that direction just because everybody says you should.
Yes. Beautiful. So well said, mate. Monty, do you believe everyone on earth has a purpose?
Yes, I do. But again, I think it is it the purpose is not something that you necessarily need to be able to articulate. The purpose is the way that you show up. Like, am I on purpose today? The purpose of my life is to be on purpose in this conversation. That's the purpose of my life. That's it.
Good.
And then, but everybody has that. Now, I think there's also something bigger that can draw us. Like for you, it's like, yeah, you want to make an impact with people, and there's something that's drawing you. But I don't know that that's necessarily your has to be described as your purpose. I don't think you need to articulate that on paper and say, my purpose in life is to be a life coach that does this, and this, and I want to impact 1 billion people. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. That gives you something to move towards. But at the end of the day, how is that affecting how you show up today? Is that actually having you show up authentically and on purpose? Or is that actually driving some desperation that is having you show up inauthentically?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not on
Yes.
purpose. You can say that is my purpose, but then you're showing up not on purpose.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. So well said, brother. I totally agree. Yeah, you don't want this purpose to become something that then cages you in, and it's like this pressure cooker that's constantly that you constantly find yourself in, and it leads to actually more toxic behavior and more disconnected behavior. So yeah, I love how you've spoken on purpose in this conversation, Monty. How can people best get in contact with you? Like if they want to find out more about the work you do, if they just want to delve into your world, if they're in Bali, they want to hang out with you in your studio.
Yeah.
Connect
So
with you.
just look for me on Instagram, Monty Hook. I don't think that there's too many Monty Hooks in the world. So there's a lot of fake Monty Hooks in terms of Instagrams. But yeah, look for me on so it's just at Monty Hook, and just look for Lighthouse Studios Bali.
Yes.
Yeah, for anybody who's ever coming to Bali, yeah, get in contact with us, drop by. We've got an amazing cafe and good food and coffee and juices, and I'm pretty fussy with the coffee. I'm still Australian after all.
I love that, mate. It sounds like our kind of place for sure. So we're definitely going to visit you when we're over there. Wherever you're watching this, there are going to be links below, so just check them out to all Monty's work. Monty, just two more questions before we wrap up. As it always seems to be the case with my guests, I could speak to them for hours because they usually I choose guests based on not just I choose guests based on feeling a deep connection to someone, even though I may not, I've never really had a conversation with you at all, but I just felt that there was a connection. I felt like there was a conversation to be had. And that is purely why I invite guests on my podcast. I don't produce them every week. There's no set amount of podcasts I release because this is an organic thing for me. It's very much so around connection. But I knew that there would be a deep conversation. It certainly has been that. So I thank you so much for your wisdom. Can I just ask you three things that you feel, based on everything you've learned, all the wisdom you've acquired, even though you might not say you've got wisdom, I know you do, three things that you feel if more people did would allow them to experience a greater quality of life?
Yeah. I think the number one thing is people are always looking for the hacks in creating success, and I've got to go work on my mindset, and I've got to there's always something to learn, there's always something missing that you can go and learn to do to be better. But I think the number one thing where the difference between people who are successful and not successful is one thing, and that is integrity. And what I mean by that is integrity to me is doing what you say you're going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what integrity is. Integrity is the reputation you have with yourself, and your self-esteem is built on the reputation you have with yourself. So I believe that if I come up with a business idea, I believe I can execute on it because in the past, I had the integrity to do what I said I'm going to do. And integrity is something that crosses over all aspects of your life. You cannot have integrity in one part of your life, and you can't say, oh, I took all the action in my business, but then I let my children down and didn't, do what I said I'm going to do there. So the number one thing for everybody is integrity, and that is doing what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to wake up at 6 a.m. and you wake up at 6:30, you are out of integrity with yourself. You are not going to believe yourself, right? If you wake up at 5:59, then you are going to believe yourself. And then the next day you're going to back yourself. And that carries through. And I don't think people understand the power and the depth of that.
Yes. I love that. I love that so much. And I agree. It's a simple thing. It's a simple concept to just throw around, but to live it, that's another thing. And I feel that many people have, I guess it's a strong word, but they have betrayed themselves time and time again, where they have not kept their word to themselves, very often because they are trying to live a life other people expect of them that's not true to them. And so they're just so not used to it.
Yeah, but the issue is it's very easy because it's very easy to come up with excuses for small things, right? So it's very easy to say, okay, well, I woke up at 6:10 a.m. today because of this particular reason, because this one thing. And it's very easy to brush off. It's like, it's not a big deal to wake up 10 minutes late. It's not, right? It's not a big deal to not make my bed today, right?
It's true.
But is it? But is it? Right? It's, that's why they say it's like the first thing you should do in the morning, you get up and you should make your bed. Why? Because you said you would do it, and it sets the standard for you having integrity for the day.
Yes.
Don't underestimate the small things. Like, just do not underestimate these small things and how they carry through how they're woven into the entirety of your life.
Beautiful. I love that. So have greater integrity. I asked for 3 things. Do you have 2 more?
Okay. I find some connection for yourself. Like, find some way to keep yourself grounded. And I'm a huge believer in that it's different for different people, So try all sorts of different things. Try meditation. Try going to the beach and just standing. Something which has you to stay grounded and stay connected. So
yes, beautiful.
Yeah, and the third thing is what I was just talking about before, which is the purpose thing. Don't get so caught up in needing to define what your purpose is. Don't get lost in that. Like, cut yourself some slack. Like, give yourself a break. Yeah.
Beautiful, brother. And
it is a big.
It is a big one. And can I ask, for you as an entrepreneur, how do you use that in your business? Because obviously you've got KPIs and things like that, I guess. But how do you have that kind of, I guess, non-attached approach in business?
Okay. So the way that I think about that is 2 things. There's macro and there's micro. So in the micro, I'm very fixated on targets, numbers, making sure the team does this, making sure that person does that, KPIs. That's the micro. But the macro, the grand scheme of where the direction things move, then that's more intuitive. That's more feeling into, where does this business want to take me, or where does this business want to go itself? But then in the detail of the business, yes, I'm hyper fixated on, managing the numbers and making sure that, the the staff cost percentages are good this month.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's why micro versus macro.
You got it. All right. That's beautifully explained. I just want to thank you so much, Monty, because this has been a very enriching conversation for me. I appreciate your perspectives. I appreciate your commitment to the truth, and just your commitment to your vision, your vision, and also your kind of non-attached approach to it all. Like I find that's extremely refreshing, and I know many people watching will find it extremely refreshing. Definitely, everyone watching, listening, please go check out Monty's work. He's up to great things in the world. Great podcast, just great energy, great information you're putting out there in the world, brother. So thank you for all you're doing. I've got one last question, something I ask all my guests, which is, if you were to get access to the back end of Facebook, Instagram, the biggest platforms, TikToks, and you had everyone's attention for a minute, what would you share with the world?
I asked a similar question, but not from the technology point of view.
Okay.
Mine is telepathy. So I'm getting asked the same question.
There we go.
Two things. It is to walk through life with compassion, like compassion for yourself and compassion for others. And it's not always easy to be like that. Like, you can have boundaries, you can be stern, you can, compassion doesn't mean you have to fold to everybody. Compassion means you don't get caught up in the emotion inside of you of having anger or having negative feelings about other people and where they're at and what they're doing. It's like everybody's on their own journey, everybody's dealing with their own shit. So having compassion for where people are at. And then the second thing is, it is that integrity piece. It's doing what you say you're going to do, because it's not only going to hold you. It's not just such a great framework for how you walk life, but it is such a inspiring way of being to other people. Like, out of all the things that we come up with all these great grand schemes of how we're going to impact the world and how we're going to do these things, but the greatest thing you can do is just have integrity in your way of being and how you show up. And that is the most impactful thing to have to the people around you, like 100%.
So good, brother. And I guess in that, when you have integrity, it creates an order in your life. And then if we look at the world right now, there is a lot of disorder. There's a lot of chaos. But as you said, with the compassion and the integrity, that brings an order. And if we do that on the micro level, it's gonna happen on the bigger platform, I guess, or in the bigger scheme of things. So thank you for the conversation, brother. I appreciate your time. And for everyone listening, definitely check out Monty's work. Thank you so much for being here, mate.
Thanks. I really appreciate the conversation, mate. Yeah, and same to you. Keep up these conversations and keep inspiring the world. And yeah, hope to see everybody in Bali.